On the 5th of March, 2022, a rock in northern Japan cracked cleanly in half. Within a day, people around the world were saying the same thing. The fox is loose. Because that rock had a name, the Killing Stone. And for nearly 900 years, the story said it held a fox with 9 tails, sealed in the rock where she died. The Japanese word for fox is kitsune. And somewhere along the way, this animal picked up a second job, messenger of a god, and a third one nobody wanted, demon. Which raises a question almost nobody asks about the most famous fox spirit on Earth. Of every animal in Japan, why this one? Start with rice. Not romance, not magic, rice. In a country that measured wealth, taxes, and survival in rice, the worst enemy wasn't an army. It was rodents. Mice and rats in the stored grain could turn a good year into a hungry one. And there was one animal that turned up reliably wherever those rodents were. Farmers watched foxes appear at the edge of the fields at dusk, hunt all night, and vanish at dawn. It looked less like scavenging and more like patrol. So the fox got attached to the god of rice, Inari, the deity of the harvest, of granaries, and eventually of prosperity itself. Here's the detail people miss. The fox is not Inari. The fox is the messenger, the one who carries word between the god and the field. Look at the statues, and you'll see the job description in stone. A fox with a key in its mouth, the key to the granary. The head shrine, Fushimi Inari, was founded in the year 711. Today, it stands at the top of around 30,000 Inari shrines across Japan. 30,000. For an animal whose original qualification was being good at catching mice. The oldest fox story Japan wrote down isn't frightening. It's sad. It's in the Nihon Ryoki, a collection put together by a monk named Kyokai, somewhere between 787 and 824. A man in Mino province meets a woman in the fields. They marry, they have a child. Then, the household dog corners her, and in her fear, she slips, and he sees the fox. And the man's response is the reason this story survived 1,200 years. He doesn't call a priest. He says, "We have a child together. Come back and sleep with me anyway." Which is where the famous wordplay comes from. Kitsune. Come and sleep. You hear that everywhere as the origin of the word. It isn't. It's a pun the storyteller made inside the tale. A good one, but a joke, not a root. The word is older than the story. It shows up in a text from 794, in an early spelling read as Kitsune, and the honest answer is that nobody knows where it comes from. What the tale does tell us is how Japan pictured foxes early on, not as monsters, as someone who could join your household, love you, and leave. The most famous version is Kuzunoha of Shinoda Forest, a fox who married the man who saved her life, raised a son, and left a farewell poem on the wall when the boy glimpsed her tail. The son, in the legend, grew up to be Abe no Seimei, Japan's most famous diviner. Half the court's supernatural authority traced back to a fox. Now, the 9 tails. They're not Japanese. The 9-tailed fox turns up first in China, in the classic of mountains and seas, a text assembled somewhere between the 4th and 1st centuries BCE, roughly 2,000 years before that rock split in Nasu. And in that first appearance, it isn't sinister at all. A 9-tailed fox was a good omen, a sign of abundance, long life, sometimes of a just ruler. The creature traveled into Korea, where it became the kumiho, into Japan as the kyubi no kitsune, the 9-tailed fox, arriving already assembled straight out of the Chinese classics. And somewhere on that journey, the omen curdled. The fox that once meant good fortune became the fox that seduces kings and topples dynasties. One more thing while we're here. That neat rule you've heard, a new tale every 100 years, each tale a new power, is mostly a modern tidy-up. The old tales are messier. They give you foxes with 1 tail, or 5, or 7, or 9, and don't explain themselves. 9 simply meant this one has gone as far as a fox can go. By the Edo period, there's a tidy system. Zenko, good foxes. Inari's foxes, white and celestial. And Yako, field foxes, the ones who trick travelers and make trouble. Clean, convenient, and according to the people who studied it closest, largely imposed from above. Lafcadio Hearn, who collected these stories in the 1890s, doubted ordinary people had ever drawn the line that sharply. The folklorist Teiri Nakamura went further. It was religious practitioners and the intelligentsia who made the good fox, bad fox divide commonplace in the first place. Which fits what villagers actually seem to have believed. Not 2 species, 1 animal. With moods. Helpful if respected. Dangerous if insulted. Exactly like a neighbor. Which brings us to the most famous fox in Japanese history, who was not, it turns out, in Japanese history. Tamamo no Mae, the most beautiful, most brilliant woman at the imperial court. The emperor falls ill. The court diviner reveals she is a 9-tailed fox draining his life. She flees, is hunted across the plain of Nasu, and dies. And her malice soaks into a rock. It's a magnificent story. It is also fiction, and we know roughly when it was written. Tamamo no Mae comes from otogizoshi, popular genre fiction of the Muromachi period, centuries after the reign it claims to describe. She appears in no contemporary court record. Historians think there was a real woman underneath her, Fujiwara no Nariko, an empress consort who was genuinely powerful, genuinely political, and genuinely resented, which may be the oldest story of all. A woman with influence, retold as a monster. And later writers went further still, reaching back 2,000 years to make her the same fox who had ruined a Chinese king. The seductress fox had come home to roost. There's a part of this history that isn't charming at all. and it deserves saying plainly.
For centuries, when someone in a village began behaving in ways nobody could explain, speaking in a voice not their own, refusing food or craving it strangely, frightened of nothing visible, the explanation reached for was Kitsune tsuki, fox possession. The people it was applied to were overwhelmingly young women and rural and poor. The treatment was exorcism. It lasted a long time. In 1891, a Japanese physician traveled to Shimane Prefecture specifically to investigate cases of fox possession, not as folklore, but as medicine. He recorded 31 of them. Modern researchers who have gone back through those records describe something a clinician today would recognize under other names entirely. The fox was never in the room. The suffering was. It's worth holding both things at once. The same animal that guarded the harvest was also the reason a frightened woman was held down in a village hall. The symbols don't stay decorative. Which brings us back to the rock. In 1689, the poet Basho walked to Nasu to see it, on the journey that became the narrow road to the deep north. He wasn't looking for a fox. He was looking at the ground. And what he wrote down is that the air around the stone was still poisonous, and that dead bees and butterflies lay so thick you could barely see the color of the sand. He was right, and he was describing chemistry. The stone sits beside volcanic vents on the flank of Mount Chaosu, venting hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide. Nothing grows there. Birds and insects that come too close genuinely die. The killing stone kills. That part was never a story. So a real lethal patch of ground got the explanation its era had available. Something furious is buried here. And in March 2022, the rock did what rocks with old cracks and freezing winters do. It split. Local officials said as much within days. The internet had a wonderful few days with it. A priest performed a rite, and a great many people who do not believe in fox spirits found themselves checking the news anyway. So, why this animal? Not because it was frightening. Foxes aren't dangerous to people. Not because it was rare. It's everywhere. The fox got the job because it showed up where the food was and stayed. It hunted at the edge of the human world, at the hours humans don't keep, and left tracks by the granary door. Close enough to be counted on, never close enough to be owned. Every promotion after that, messenger, trickster, demon, the face on a festival mask, is built on that one observation. A farming country made holy the animal that turned up where the harvest was. The fox was never invented, it was promoted. And it's still being promoted, which, if you think about it, is exactly the career you'd expect from a fox.